great. What do we have for our first cocktail, Chris?
Well, I figured, especially based on the first reading and based on these illustrious surroundings, in the book and everything like that, that we had to start with the most illustrious of cocktails, which is a Manhattan. And so the apocryphal story, about this is that it was invented at a party in 1874 by Jenny Jerome, also known as Lady Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's mother. The story is apocryphal because she was actually home pregnant with Winnie at the time. And so it's highly unlikely she actually invented it, but it does go back at least to the 1880s. And, bespeaks leather, cigars, subdued lighting, fireplaces, and the illustrious gentlemen and ladies that might inhabit rooms at this time in salons. So I have the idea of being able to create a Manhattan here. We're going to start off with rye whiskey. Now, interestingly enough, all Canadian whiskey is envisioned as rye whiskey, even though it can have as little as 0% rye in it. And so that's kind of interesting all by itself. Whereas American rye whiskey has to have at least 51% rye in it to be considered rye whiskey. And I was first thinking of trying to make this with my favorite rye, which is Whistle Pig, made by Alberta Distillers, but the price of it we found locally was a little excessive. So, we went with the Canadian whiskey instead, and going from there. So we start with a couple ounces of rye. We also have our wonderful sweet vermouth. So we'll throw in a little bit of that. There's a little too much. I'll put that back. And we have some Angostura bitters in order to provide a little bit of a nice contrast to the sweetness of the vermouth and the rye.
That's bitter.
Indeed, it would be. Yeah, accidentally splashed her. We'll throw in some wonderful ice. Take that up with my shaker glass, just a little bit.
Love it.
It looks like maybe we haven't found the top of the shaker and unpacking yet.
Gotta improvise.
Right. We're improvising.
Normally I would strain this with my wonderful strainer, but in the move we haven't figured out how to find that yet. So
you got a nice glass for that too.
Yeah, we have found the important things, the glasses and the alcohol.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
And we're going to throw a maraschino cherry in there.
Throw in a second.
Love it.
Please.
Yes, indeed.
And you've got a great setting for that drink too, by the way.
So, remind me what this drink is?
A Manhattan.
A Manhattan. Okay, so Chris is going to have the first drink.
Absolutely wonderful.
Turned out great. Of course it did.
I'm not sure I've ever had Manhattan because I'm on an IV. I'm not having my own drink. It's kind of bitter, but I do like that.
Yes, it's wonderfully rich, just like the tone of the first reading, I believe, in terms of the room that it's in. So,
and I can easily imagine that as you described it and as you describe the room.
And so I'm not sure that it fits into any of the many that.
Right. That was one of my first thoughts. It just doesn't. So many of these storylines are, like the Oedipus story, for example, that are told over and over again. The Romeo and Juliet sort of story. Right. I guess the Star-Crossed Lovers is what that one's called. This doesn't fit in any, as far as I know. So that really struck me. I don't think I've ever read a book before that just doesn't fit. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
You've created a whole new storyline that nobody else has done, which leads me to the question, what put this idea in your head, and why the interest in American presidents? What brought that up?
Well, I've always been fascinated with them. And I mean, I've got, I'm in front of one of my bookshelves here that has mostly presidential biographies, and they're all starting with Washington, and so I've always been fascinated by that, and so I've read a ton about it, so I know a little bit about it. But but and I've always wanted to write a novel, and I have a whole file full of potential novel plots, but when we went to my wife for her 50th birthday wanted to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame of all places, and driving back with the family, everybody was asleep, and I was like thinking big. I just started writing another novel that was a little more of a traditional novel, so to speak, but the idea popped in my head. I was thinking about baseball and Field of Dreams, and I love the concept of Field of Dreams, the movie, and in the book, by the way.
You mentioned it in your novel.
Yeah, exactly. And the movie Midnight in Paris. I love the movie Midnight in Paris, and they're both kind of the same, where somebody can go. Well, in Field of Dreams, these players come back from the past and they interact with people in the present, and in maybe it's kind of the reverse in Midnight in Paris, where an author in Paris today goes back in time and Paris in the 20s with Hemingway and Gertrude Stein and people like that, and I just love that concept, and so I was thinking about that as I was driving home, and I thought, there should be an American history version of that, or a political.
Fantastic. I remember Carrie Nation from deep in my past, but I don't remember exactly what she did. I was going to look her up today and I forgot. So give a quick reminder.
So she was the some would call her she was the most vocal prohibition supporter, and she would go around and destroy bars. She would go in. In fact, I've been at the Manger Bar in San Antonio, where Teddy Roosevelt rounded up his Rough Riders to go storm San Juan Hill, and she went into that bar with a big hatchet and busted up the bar, and they still have you can still see the piece that she busted out of it, but she would do that, and so she was. Some would, like I said, some would call her a terrorist. She was making an example.
Pictures of. Now, one thing I wanted to ask in the last section, and this is a huge question, so I couldn't ask it at the end. Your entire book is based on this idea that, as you say, we can do better than this. I'm looking around at the things going on today. You wrote this book, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2017 is when I started.
I think things have gotten much more divisive, much more schismed since then, if that's the word it is now, because I used it. Do you think at this point that we can come together? What do you think?
I would say, So one of the themes of the book, we're better than this. And there are times when I wonder if we are. But things happen, and I continue, and I'm an optimist. I continue to believe that there is a way out. I wrote this book hoping that I could play a role. I didn't have an outsized view. And it's done great. 5,000 people or so on the first one have read it. I wanted to do something. I think the right leader might be able to unite the country still. I still believe that. And I was in both of the books. I kind of map out a path where that might be able to happen. And so I'm not saying it's easy, and it will take a monumental effort. But I refuse to believe that it can't happen.
To me, one of the problems that stands in the way is I don't believe that everybody wants to come together. I believe that, obviously that takes compromise. It takes working with each other.
It does.
Takes saying, these people who don't believe what I do, I think they're wrong, but they're not evil. We can talk. And I think a lot of people are beyond that.
Well, I think you raise a good point when you say they're not evil. And I think at our extremes, we view the other side as evil. And if we could try to understand why they believe what they believe, on both and in the middle, and not just saying, oh, they're despicable, they're full of hate, they're racist, or they're, you name it, and which with both sides are claiming about the other. We all start from the same position in this country and grow to a point where now, but if we could just understand that more,
I have one last question on a lighter topic. We were talking just before we actually started recording about your research into presidential drinks.
Right. Correct. So we have, and so everything in the book. So I have, chapters about baseball and about you name it, and about music, and everything that's in there is researched. So when the presidents are talking about whatever subject it is, books, it's what they've actually said, and drinking is a piece of that too. So this is a book that I had before I even had the concept to write my novels, and this is by Mark Will Weber, who I've now gotten to know, and he endorsed both my books. But he is the expert on presidential drinking. And this is the complete history of presidential drinking, and it's called Mint Juleps with Teddy Roosevelt, and it goes president by president and what they drank, and then he did a Republican version and a Democratic version.
So that's so funny. I wish we had like 3 hours. I would ask you to really delve into that.
Right. Yeah. But this isn't the only, but this is, to me, is just like the Bible for my book in terms of, because everything they order in that saloon, they ordered in real life.
That is really
so I made it, it was important to me to do that. But there's other sources of that too.